Welcome to Study Abroad and Sustainable Living, one of the key events of International Education Week. Our students are facing an uncertain future, one disrupted by climate crisis, global pandemic, social inequities, and so much more. Studying abroad teaches us about ourselves and our relationship to the world around us, including the planet itself. Today, we bring together study abroad and international students to discuss sustainability practices in their home country and what they have learned from studying abroad in other countries. They will consider how their experiences abroad change their perspective on climate change and sustainability practices, and will alter their behavior back home. I'm so pleased to have with us today our resident expert in sustainability practices, Rebecca Collins, Director of Sustainability at Temple University. In this position, Ms. Collins supports the advancement of sustainable academic initiatives and research, identifies opportunities to integrate sustainability into campus operations, and creates opportunities for outreach and engagement on sustainability issues for faculty, staff, and students. She's also been working closely with our office on our sustainability initiatives. Before coming to Temple, Rebecca was the Corporate Initiatives Manager for Sustainability at the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, which some of you may know as SEPTA. At SEPTA, she developed programs that integrated sustainable best practices into SEPTA's infrastructure and operations, and executed SEPTA's second-generation Energy Action Plan as part of SEPTA's commitment to reduce energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. Originally from Bucks County and currently a resident of Philadelphia, Rebecca holds a master's degree in urban environmental systems management from Pratt Institute and a bachelor's degree in communications from Syracuse. Welcome, Rebecca, and thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited. So one of the things that my bio does not say is that I am a lover of travel. Do it whenever I can. These past 2 years has been a little bit hard for me for many reasons, but specifically not being able to travel has been hard. Today we are joined by students who have had the opportunity to travel and are sharing their experience about study abroad and sustainable living, providing perspectives, answering really interesting questions, and hopefully offering some inspiration for all those attending. So I want to just jump right into it. I want to introduce our panelists, and then we can get into their perspectives and hearing from them. So first, I would love to introduce Pangcheng, from an international student from Shanghai, China. They are a senior and studying statistics and data analysts. And, you know, it's always a challenge studying abroad. You know, for some of us, it may be the first time that we're away. And so I'm really excited to hear from Pangcheng about, you know, their experience being here in Philadelphia. Another one of our panelists, Kerry. Kerry recently graduated from Temple in spring 2021 with a degree in media studies and production and a minor in environmental studies. They are originally from Chester County, Pennsylvania, go Chester County, and was studying abroad in Australia and Germany. So can't wait to hear from you, or excuse me, just Australia. Miquela was studying abroad in Germany. Miquela is a sophomore global studies and German major, and was, now Miquela, are you currently in Germany?
Yes, I am, yeah.
Oh, thanks for we truly are international. And so you're going to be providing us with some insight about your experience, and we're so excited to hear from you today. Also joining us today is Emma. Emma is also abroad right now in Rome. I'm not sure if Emma is here because she was coming from class, but she is a senior and majoring in political science with a communication and activism minor and political economy certificate, also from Chester County. So welcome to our panelists. So let's just get right into some housekeeping notes. So for our panel, please just keep yourself on mute. We encourage questions. Please type your questions in the chat, and we'll have Q&A at the end. And we'd also like you to share at the end something that you learned from the panel. We're always interested in feedback and your perspective as well. So thanks so much. All right, so I want to dive in with two of my most favorite things, which are sustainability and food. So Dana Goodyear, who's an American journalist, once said that food is a lens for culture, and I could not agree more. It is the reason that I love seeking out different types of food when traveling. But I'm also keenly aware about how different culture's relationship to food is sustainable, right? Sustainability and food really go hand in hand. So thinking about your experience abroad, I'm interested to hear from the panelists. Have you noticed any interesting or different ways where you're studying that approach food that support sustainability? So I am told that Emma has joined us. So Emma, I'm going to put you on the spot right away and hope that you can answer this question about food and sustainability and what you've, what you've noticed about living in Rome.
Yeah, definitely. Hello, everyone. So in Rome, we definitely have the locals here definitely have a different perspective to food and food waste and just sustainability in general in regards to it. So like, for example, in the US, we love to purchase food in bulk. We love to do one grocery shop during the week and have that be it. And I tried to apply that perspective here in Rome, and it just did not work. Romans here, they will go grocery shopping every day or multiple times throughout the week to ensure that they are, for one, minimizing food waste, but they can just eat their food as fresh as they possibly can, which is a really great concept. And I would like to kind of apply that to my life living back home, because it really does reduce food waste. And it's a really great perspective to have on sustainability in regards to cooking at home. And almost at supermarkets here, you're almost forced to buy less things. The conveyor belts at supermarkets, they are very small. It's not like in the US where they're very long, they're very small. You can only fit maybe 10 or 15 items on it at a time. And supermarkets here, they're very accessible. They're almost built for you to run there on the way home and make it back and just make like dinner right when you get home from the fresh ingredients you purchased that day. Another thing I noticed about food and sustainability here is that to-go coffee or taking food home from a restaurant, that is not a concept that exists whatsoever, which is really great in regard to sustainability, because you're going to have less things you're throwing away. You're not going to have that to-go coffee cup that isn't recyclable like you have in the US. So it's a really great concept that they have here. And restaurants will also get offended if you don't finish your food sitting down at that meal, which is kind of funny. So you are forced to eat all of your food. There will be no plastic container you take your food home in. So it's a great concept, really. It's really interesting that that's the way that is there, because at home, everything is to go. We run on Dunkin' and Starbucks.
Yeah, right. I know, it's amazing observation. And it's something that I definitely appreciated in traveling in Italy, especially with the coffee, where it was like an experience, right? Where it wasn't just something that you picked and you left with. So that's really great, Emma. I love your observation, and I agree. Like, thinking about waste reduction and food is really important to sustainability movement. Pangcheng, I'm curious what your experience has been, either at home or here in the US. Could you provide some of your observations about sustainability in food?
Hi everyone. I just find the American has like many vegetarians or the vegans, and I must to say I cannot find so many in China. So at first I come here and I have a friend. She has come from the New Jersey, and she is a very serious vegan. And I just kind of thinking about like whether this kind of like eating habits are healthy or not, because my mom always tells me you must to eat everything. So but I just try with her and like for 1 week, and I find that actually right now I can find a lot of stuff in here can like instead of the meat, like the Impossible Burger, the Beyond the Meat, they just have a lot of like options for us to choose. And right now I'm not like thinking about, oh, I cannot eat any meat. I just want to like try to like eat less. And I think maybe in China, maybe in the future, we can also do that. Of course, not for our health, and it also can maybe provide some like to animals, like because I find some like documentaries, the animals in this kind of industry is so poor. So I hope maybe in the future we can just try to eat less meat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really important point too, right? So it's, for me, my approach to sustainability in food has always been, like really thinking about the impact and really, try to incorporating sustainable practices and really integrating more plant-based things and less meat. So that's really interesting that you had that experience studying here. So thank you so much for that. Last, Miquela, I'm really interested. Did you have similar experiences to Emma, also being in Europe, or what kind of are your observations?
Well, as far as I know for Germany, I guess the first thing that that comes to mind is in Germany, it's really common to have like what they call bio, which is just another word for organic. And I found that like living in the US, a lot of people, I don't know, I didn't really ever think of buying organic because I know a lot of that types of food options are at like Whole Foods and are generally like more expensive. But in here in Germany, they're generally at every supermarket, which is nice because they like I know in the US you can kind of have like everything you need in just in one supermarket, but in Germany, it's typical to have like an Aldi or Lidl, which has like really basic stuff, but the more specific you get. So if you want to get like maybe, I don't know, a certain type of noodle, you might have to go to a more expensive grocery store, which is kind of nice because like that they have the organic options everywhere, because it shows that, you don't have to have more or less money to be healthy. And a lot of the times in Germany, a lot of the food is in season, or at least the fruits and vegetables are, which is great because I know in the States, like you can kind of get an avocado year round, which, avocados take a lot of water, but it also takes a lot of carbon dioxide to transport them across the entire world to get to your plate. So that was one of the things I noticed, that a lot of people like to eat bio, and I think it's just better for your body because it's not filled with preservatives or pesticides or whatever they put in fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
And another thing, I guess, with sustainability, that's not really directed with food, but more with like what the packaging. So in Germany, they have something called Pfand. So if you go to Aldi and you buy like a water bottle like this big, and you finish it, you can bring it back to to Aldi and you put it in this machine, and it goes through the machine, and you get like 25 cents back, and you get like a little, I guess, yeah, you get money for bringing back your bottles, and then it's further recycled, which I think is really great. It's kind of like an incentive to really recycle what you have. So I think that's just another way of how Germans use food and food waste, or how they use sustainable ways to dispose of food.
That's great. I'm so glad that you touched upon that like waste aspect, right? And Emma, you talked about it too, and like thinking about food waste and just buying less, and like what that means, like really using what you've you bought to prepare your meal. So kind of thinking about waste and personal impact. So much of what we see and is really familiar to us about sustainability is waste, is recycling. And so I'm just curious to hear from our panelists, what was one thing that you packed or wished you would have packed to make your study abroad experience more sustainable from like a waste perspective, let's say? Kerry, tell us what you learned. What did you pack? What did you wish you would have packed?
Sure. So I think myself, and along with most of anyone who studied abroad, would say I wish I had packed less. If you're ever like on the fence, like, oh, do I need to bring this? I don't know. It is a pretty good bet that you probably won't need it. So just like having a smaller impact on the things that like you're traveling with is always like a great way to be a little bit more sustainable. But I also discovered that once I got to Australia, the program that I was in had an additional program where if you needed something, you could buy it secondhand, and then at the end of your trip, you had the option to whatever you didn't want to bring home with you, which ends up being a lot after a period of a few months, you can donate back to this program, which is a really sustainable way to keep these easily transferable things that anyone might need while they're studying abroad. And instead of just throwing them away, they can be reused again by the next person. And I was definitely like surprised by when I got to Australia. I was like, oh, I need this, I need that. I couldn't have packed this, so now I need to go get that. So it was just like a really great option to be able to do that. So I would definitely suggest, looking into programs like that, even if it's outside of whatever like study abroad thing you're going to. There's plenty of thrift stores and stuff like that in most major cities. So that was definitely an interesting thing that I learned.
That is so cool. I'm so glad that they have that program. And Kerry, I don't want you to feel alone. I too packed way too much stuff when I studied abroad in Australia. So I feel you on that one. Miquela, any inspiration or something that, you want to share with the group?
Yeah, so before I actually studied in Germany, I was in Austria for 5 months in high school. And so when I came back this time, I actually brought a water bottle, or like a reusable water bottle. The water in Germany and Austria is really clean. Like they make sure that it's just like top quality. So you can pretty much drink from any tap water. Like I know from the States, I know it's kind of different depending on like what district you live in, what state you're in, what city you're in, like it's pretty varying. So I usually, like in the States, I wouldn't be my first choice to drink tap, but here it's pretty much all I drink. And I know that they have like the fund, so you technically can go out and get a plastic water bottle and then go back to Aldi. But I think it just saves like a lot of time and money if you just drink the water here. And I don't know, it's pretty sustainable in case, because I know some people there are obviously people who still litter in Germany, and so will, I don't know, buy water bottles and then just kind of throw them on the ground. So I think a water bottle is just a really great thing to bring, especially if you're traveling here, because it's really safe. Like the water here is top notch. So I pretty much bring it everywhere. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I too, I love my water bottle. I bring it wherever I go, and I agree. It's just a great way to reduce your personal impact and save money too, right? Bottled water not only is carbon intensive, but it also, is expensive. So that's great. Great tips. Thanks for sharing. So as Suzanne mentioned, my background before coming to Temple, I worked for SEPTA. So I love to talk about transportation. Transportation emissions are one of the leading sources of greenhouse gas emissions in worldwide. And in the US, single occupancy vehicles are still like the way that the majority of people travel. So I want to hear from the group. What have you noticed about the way people get around abroad, either in the city where you studied or are studying or have studied? And is it different from Philadelphia or from your hometown? Really interested in hearing about that. So Miquela, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. So I think that like Hamburg, where I'm staying, and Germany in general, does a really great job with like public transportation. I'm from the suburbs, so yeah, there's no public transportation is kind of like a no-go. Even like bikes or scooters, like you kind of need a car to get around. But if you live in any big city in Germany, there's always like a subway system that is, some of them are like 24 hours, some aren't, but if they're not, there's almost always a night bus you can take. There's individual bus systems. Even throughout Germany, there's the Deutsche Bahn, which just goes throughout the entire country. So I think I wrote my blog post, it's possible to go from like where I am in Hamburg in the north to Munich in the south. You can get there in like 6 hours with like a direct train if you needed to. And where I live in Hamburg as well, there are lots of bike lanes, which I wasn't expecting. Like I almost felt bad because I sometimes would get in the way and I didn't even realize they were lanes, but there are designated bike lanes like almost everywhere. And like sometimes parents will have like a little, I don't know how to explain it, like a little carriage for their child on the back of the bike. So really a lot of people like to use bikes, but also scooters are really popular. Which is great because it saves a lot of emissions. And I think it's really interesting how I know a lot of European cities are built this way. Like I was watching a video a few days ago on how city planning in the US, a lot of it is based on parking spaces. So city planning is like, let's build for the cars. In European, everything is underground. So it's more accessible for people, which is really interesting difference. But yeah, in that regard, it's not in comparison to like Philadelphia, there might not be too much of a difference because Philly also has subway system, but I feel like it's still a little bit more like people friendly. But
yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. I think the investments being made in Germany around public transit are definitely really helpful and able to support sustainable transportation. And I think, public transportation can be a little bit intimidating, but, just wherever you're going, wherever you're studying, the study abroad office can provide you with tips and tricks. Most people, who are riding transit can offer you some suggestions. So I know it can be intimidating, but it really is one of the best ways a lot of the times to get around and explore your city. So Kerry, I'm interested. Australia, a little bit different than Germany. What do you have any perspective about sustainability and transportation in Australia?
Yeah. So I was in Sydney and I absolutely loved their public transportation. Everyone was expecting me to come home and be like, oh, I did this and I saw the Opera House and I did that. And I came home and I was like, oh my gosh, I loved their like buses and their subways. Everything made sense. It is a very public transport kind of city. They definitely have, their fair share of cars, but their public transportation was like nothing I've seen before. I was very impressed. Like in Philly, I've always felt, fairly limited to having, where you wanted to go. It's kind of dark, it's a little dirty. It's not like everyone's favorite thing. But in Sydney, it was so clear, it was so easy, it was so clean. And one of my favorite parts was that it was just like, it made sense. Everyone had a card. So like in the US, like if you do like 2 stops or if you do 6 stops, it's all like the same. You're paying like $3 no matter what. But in Sydney, like it all depends on, if you're going from here to here, you're only going to pay 60 cents. But if you go there to here, you're paying $1.20. which I absolutely loved about that. And it really does encourage people to use it a lot more. But I absolutely loved it. And they are continuing to add more and more. So they're expanding a lot of their public transportation. It's not just limited to, you know, oh, this is what we have, so this is what we have. They're working to make it more accessible for people so that people don't have to be driving cars every day, and it can be something super easy to do, because, you know, everyone has to get around every day. So
yeah, absolutely. I also found myself talking about the buses when I got back from Sydney. So you are in the transit nerd club, Kerry, and I mean that very affectionately. love public transit. Another thing that I found that was great about Sydney was that you could buy a ticket at newsstands. So it was like really easy to buy fare, which is another thing that I know that you can do in Rome. And Emma, so Emma is, Emma and I know each other. We go way back. Emma actually participated in a program, opportunity that we offer through the Office of Sustainability, our walk audit certification. So while in Rome, she participated and was looking at the built environment and how it could support sustainability, and really looking at like how physical space, the built environment, prioritize walking, biking, transit. So, you know, Emma, I'm curious if you have anything to add or could tell about your experience, either with walk audit program or public transportation in Rome.
Yeah, so I would say Rome is definitely built to walk. It's kind of funny here. You will not see minivans like you will at home. You won't see Range Rovers. Every car is very compact. You see a lot of smart cars, Fiats, and that's how the city's built. There will be parking spaces that are, you know, very, very small, designed for compact cars. And in addition to that, gas is very expensive here. So not that that's the way that they're directly trying to encourage people to walk, but it definitely plays a factor into how frequently people are driving in comparison to walking. But in regards to the walkability of Rome, like I said, it is meant to walk around. It's very different than walking around in Philadelphia, and especially in accessibility to mass transit. Rome is very accessible. You can really get anywhere from Rome, whether it is just from one part of Rome to another, or traveling from here to, say, Milan. It's very clear cut, especially in regards to riding buses. I know back home, I never took buses, and here it is very, very simple and very efficient. And also with the metro here, it is similarly much more efficient, and you can really get anywhere with it. And purchasing tickets is a lot easier. So you can buy monthly transit passes for, I believe, €36, which if you're commuting to work and back, that is very affordable. But you can also just tap your credit card to get on the subway, which is absolutely amazing. I wish Philadelphia would adopt it. SEPTA key cards confuse me so much, and they are ever changing, and I can almost never get transit right in Philadelphia. But Rome really, I mean, their metro system is fantastic. It is very easy to get to. It's very accessible. Once you're inside the transit system, it's not a maze like it is in Philadelphia. I can't explain how long it took for me to find the Market Frankfurt line in Philly, transferring from Broad Street to Market Frankfurt. And the same with, Philadelphia is just much more difficult. In Rome, everybody uses mass transit. There is traffic congestion, but not nearly that of which you'd find in Philadelphia.
That's awesome. Again, like I think it can be like a little bit intimidating to travel in a way that you're not necessarily used to, you know, getting on a bus system or a metro. But again, there's so many resources available for you. It's a great way to explore the city that you're in. And it sounds, Emma, it sounds like it's very, very affordable too, which is always important. So kind of following up on that, I'm curious, Emma, do you have any tips or suggestions about traveling for longer weekends? I know that's something that students really enjoy doing when studying abroad, is like exploring not just the city where they're studying, but also surrounding areas.
Yeah, so that is pretty much what we do here. We will go on day trips or weekend trips pretty much every weekend. In regards to transit, like you kind of mentioned, don't be afraid to take mass transit. Once you arrive in your city, however, Italy is very walkable in general. I mean, I've traveled to maybe 6 or so different cities in Italy thus far, and we have mostly relied on walking. That is how we get from place to place. It is very easy. Every city, you can pretty much reach anything you want through walking. And their transit systems are the same in every city we've gone to. So it's not like in the US where DC has this metro system, Philadelphia has this metro system. They are all the exact same system, same with buses, same with metros. So you can really, once you understand one city, you can pretty much get around anywhere in Italy, which is really, really great. In regards to just traveling for longer weekend trips and being sustainable in your travel, I definitely think like just do not be afraid to expect where you're traveling to be sustainable. You can be sustainable anywhere. I think I expected here to have to kind of forget all of my interest in sustainability and have to adapt to this new city and kind of forget about the sustainable practices I was having at home. But you really can apply that to anywhere you go. Like I know here, even if it's just not for travel, like just me living here in Rome, one of the things for me that really helped me make this apartment and the city home is by like just reusing things. Like every glass container I've used to decorate our room, and empty wine bottles I've used as decor. And all of my roommates kind of got on board too. And it's just one way that we made Rome our home. So it's definitely just don't be afraid that you can't adapt your life and your habits to that of your host city or where you're traveling, even if it's just for a few days.
That's awesome advice. I believe that style of decor is bespoke, is the fancy way of saying that. One thing that Susanna and I have talked a lot about, and Emma, it's so great to hear when thinking about like traveling and incorporating sustainability and that it's easy to do, is that, especially in Italy, the train system is really, really wonderful. And to get from one city to another for a long weekend or a day trip is very easy. And I know that, high-speed rail is not something that we're necessarily used to in the United States. But when you think about your carbon impact of, either you're taking a high-speed train or you're maybe looking at a flight, when you think about not only it from a carbon perspective, but a time perspective, and a lot of time money perspective, the train comes out on top on all three of those things. It's less carbon intensive, it takes less time, and a lot of the time it's less expensive. So don't be afraid to really look into the rail system if you are studying in Rome. So many like wonderful perspectives. I learned so much. I hope that you've inspired some of our attendees, given them things to think about when they are studying abroad. The thing that I keep on coming back to is that travel is just a wonderful opportunity to just learn about people, to learn about food, sustainable systems like transit. It connects us, and hopefully it reminds us that we are one global community. And one universal issue that connects all of us is climate change. So I was going to go there. I have to talk about climate change. But I believe that together we can and must mobilize to embrace solutions to mitigate the worst effects of climate change. And so, as one of my heroes, Bill Nye, has often said that the best thing that we can do about climate change is to talk about it. So I'm curious, Pangcheng, does your home country or place where you're studying, Philadelphia, talk about climate change and mainstream media?
Yes. And I still remember just in the summers in China, I think it's kind of a big, one of the bigger city is named Zhengzhou, as faced very seriously for the water. And I just see the report, and it says just, I remember it's like kind of 1 year of worst rainfall. It's just happened in the 3 days, and the social media is just talking about that and the warns our just because of like the climate change. So so that this kind of like extremely weather is like becomes more frequently and more seriously. So but I know like some social media is not to report the truth. They just over to talk about that and just help us like to believe in the truth and how to say that, just I don't hope this kind of things happened.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for sharing that. I think we're always curious to hear about other perspectives and how media really influences and adds to the discussion around climate. So I really appreciate that perspective and you sharing that with us. You know, another thing about climate change is that it really impacts all the places. It really has an impact on places that we love, that we dream about traveling. You know, for example, in Philadelphia, a place that I love, it's getting hotter and wetter, and you know, it's raining more, extreme heat, and that really has the effect on both of our infrastructure, but hotter temperatures especially disproportionately affect Philly's most vulnerable residents. And so one of the things that I was really curious about was, you know, what our panelists' perspective, reading an article about someplace else, about climate change and a location, and really just to share what you learned and kind of your insights. So Kerry, I know that you picked an article about Australia, and I was hoping that you could just share with everyone what you learned and some of your insights.
Sure. So the article I read was about the wildfires in Australia that, you know, took over the media in 2019. And I had the unique experience of studying in Australia in the spring of 2020, when a lot of that was still affecting the country, and it still is affecting the country today. They made me purchase a mask, which was ironic because I got to Sydney and I didn't end up needing it because most of the smoke from the city had cleared. But then a couple months later, I did need it because there was a global pandemic. But it was a very interesting experience being able to, you know, visit this country in such a time of crisis for them, especially environmentally and very politically. And a lot of this article does talk about, you know, the politics of climate change, especially, you know, with addressing the increasing, you know, wildfires in Australia. And I found it very interesting to be like surrounded by politics that aren't the US, because especially, you know, the past 4 years, it just like US politics is so all consuming. When you're here, it's hard to like see anything else. But Australians are having like a huge struggle politically with climate change action. Their Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, is like very famous for not wanting to take action, not wanting to do anything, and kind of just being like, oh, like it is what it is. And so that's been a real issue. But it Australia is one of the biggest fossil fuel exporters. And so they need to understand the impacts that, even though they might be lower in actual like fossil emissions, I mean, they're very high up, but they're lower than the US, their impacts of, you know, sending out these fossil fuels to other countries does have a negative impact coming back to them. And looking at the fires, it did an absolute devastation on their environment in Australia. It was estimated that 3 billion animals died or were displaced, which is an astounding number. And they're still trying to, you know, reel back those impacts. They're still trying to discover, you know, does this like species still even exist because of fires that may have gone extinct? And a lot of the issues that they also see are, you know, personal. A lot of people's homes were destroyed. And a lot of that was unfairly placed onto Indigenous communities in Australia, which are often, you know, swept to the side. But in some of my classes, we were talking and focusing a lot on how to include Indigenous voices into the topic of climate change, because they need to be at the forefront of this movement. They have been here for so long that they understand this area more than anyone else. And so wow. I found that to be really interesting that, you know, they're talking so much about, you know, including Indigenous people, and they're like taking action to include it. And I thought it was interesting because I had a conversation with one of the girls in my class, and I was saying, wow, like it's really amazing to see like, you know, action in taking, you know, Indigenous people and getting them involved and listening to them. And she was like, really? Like, we are like terrible, like we need to do like way more, like, and I was like, oh no, if I thought this was good, the situation in the US must be like 1,000 times worse, because we don't talk about it at all.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to see, you know, that perspective.
Yeah, I think it's so important to include different voices in climate conversations, and really to understand that, you know, it doesn't affect everyone the same, right? And to be aware of that and really be advocates for action, right? And to be good listeners. So I really appreciate your thoughtfulness and for reflecting and sharing your experience, because I think it's incredibly important to have conversations like this. So thank you so much, Kerry, for sharing that with us today. I know that Pangcheng also read an article, and I believe it was about South Korea and climate change. I was hoping that you could share some of what you learned.
This is a talk about the climate change make the South Korean, the summer longer and the winter is hotter and shorter. I know the Korean is close to China, so China is also have this kind of problem. I still remember maybe in 10 years ago, I still can see the snow in the winter, but right now this year I never see the snow again in China, and I know China has always says they will improve the climate change problems, but the China is still a developing country, and I think it is kind of different with the Korea, and so we still maintain the like. We also need to make sure the economy to grow, because it is here about everyone's eating or everyone's living. So I know it just have a long way to go, and I wish we can find some like better ways to improve that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, No, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I do. I always wish, every day I wish, that we just get a little bit closer to really being mindful and changing habits. And, but I believe that we are. I believe that we have the solutions. I believe that we have the knowledge. I believe that through these conversations, through dedication of all of the people on this panel and the people that attended, we're going to mitigate the worst effects of climate change. So my final question, and I was hoping that, if you feel inspired, panelists, you can chime in, but what is one thing that you either did or are currently doing that supports climate activism that you're going to try to incorporate into your life moving forward? Is there anyone? I'm just going to open it up.
One thing that that Rome actually does, they have a completely different type of like trash system. So they separate cardboard, they separate glass, they separate everything, but they also have compost bins everywhere. So in our apartment, we have 4 different trash cans, and then we have a small little compost bin for all of our, food waste that is compostable. And I've always thought that composting was out of reach and kind of difficult to implement in temporary housing and student housing, but that is one of the first things that I will be doing back home. I am getting a compost bin and I'm putting it in my apartment, and it's going to be great, and it's going to make me feel much better about food waste and being more conscientious about food waste. And it's much easier than I anticipated to be able to incorporate that kind of a sustainable practice into the life of a college student, even studying abroad.
That's awesome to hear. And Emma, I just want to let you know that the Office of Sustainability can always be a resource to answer any of your composting questions. We're happy to support anyone who's interested. So it's great to hear, Emma. I'm very excited for you. I compost, so have a lot of thoughts. Anyone else before we open it up to the group? Kerry, it seems like you unmuted. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I loved about Australia is there's a lot of focus on, keeping the lights off. In the place that I lived, you were given a key to access your room. And in order to turn the lights on, you had to stick the key into a little slot, and that would turn the lights on. And so anytime you left, you had to take the key out, and it would turn off all of the electricity in the room. And so that was kind of consistent in a lot of places that I went, and a lot of places that I stayed. And, the more you do it, the more you're aware of, oh, wow, like I should turn these lights off. Like this doesn't need to be on, that doesn't need to be running. So I think coming back, I was a lot more conscious of doing that.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I know that I learned a lot. You've inspired me. You make me feel good about our future with all these conversations and really thinking about how to integrate sustainability and climate action into travel and your day-to-day life. So I don't know if I see a lot of activity in the chat. Just, feel free to drop a question in there or even unmute yourself. We'd love to answer any questions that you might have. Oh, Eliza, I've been trying to remove plastic waste from my beauty routine because that is an industry where there is so much plastic packaging. Yes, 100%. There is, if you are in Philadelphia, there is a great local store that just opened up. It's called Goodbye, B-U-Y Supply. It's in South Philadelphia on Pangcheng Ave, and it actually has a lot of like hygiene care, not so much cosmetics, but like shampoos, lotions, conditioners, that sort of thing that are actually plastic free. So they are a great place or a great resource. They're in Philadelphia, they're local, they're a small business. So that might be a really great resource for you to check out.
I actually have a question for Miquela. If you don't mind me putting you on the spot, you just wrote a really wonderful blog post about sustainability in Germany. And I know you read an article too about Germany's ranking in the world when it comes to climate impact. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so the article I just read talked about how Germany would be impacted by climate change. I think like what I talked about, or I guess when we think about climate change and who's affected by it, I think what comes to mind is usually less developed countries, or like where there's a lot of a heavy focus on like agriculture or like farming that's needed for the people, I guess. So that's kind of what comes to mind. But Germany, in this article, they mentioned how Germany was, I think, number 3 in terms of countries that would be impacted by climate change in terms of the weather, and which is really interesting because in this past summer, I don't know if anyone saw on the news, but in one of German state in Nordrhein-Westfalen, there was a heavy flooding, and it was really bad. I think lots of rain damage pretty much destroyed a lot of small towns. I'm not really sure. I don't think it was any big city, but lots of small villages. I think, unfortunately, around maybe like 150 people died. And I think it really shows that even how industrialized countries really need to start putting focus on climate change. And because, you know, it's not just less developed countries, it's everyone and everyone's in it. So I think that was really interesting in terms of how climate change is affecting pretty much everyone. I'm not entirely sure how, like, I know they also have been discussing, Germany is discussing climate change. They have a political party here called the Green Party, whose basis is pretty much centered around the politics around making a greener, sustainable, like putting sustainable policies more in the government. But at the same time, I think there's still a lot of work to do. I think Germany's still doing better than the US, but I think it just shows that everyone needs to be in the discussion, because it's not just the other people having the consequences, it's everyone who's going to have to weigh the consequences in the end.
Great, thank you. I'm going to drop a link to Miquela's blog post on this topic right in the chat for anyone who wants to read it. And I want to remind you too that we're hoping you all can share some of your takeaways from today. So go ahead and continue to drop questions in the chat if you have them. But if you can also let us know, what's something that you learned during this session today that was perhaps surprising to you about another country, or something that maybe you're taking away from today that you hope to incorporate into your everyday life. We would love to hear from you on that. Rebecca, while we're waiting for some comments, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about Temple's climate action plan and what we can expect, what changes we might be able to expect here in the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I was hoping you would ask that. So we will be publishing our sustainability annual report in January of 2022, looking back on the past year, tracking our goals and initiatives that support our ultimate goal of carbon neutrality by 2050. So we're really thinking about our impact from not only operations, so how we run our buildings, how we power, keep the lights on, keep the buildings heated and cooled, but also thinking about, how are we having these conversations? How are we providing different perspectives? The culture, how people live is really important to climate activism. So, doing more things like this, partnering with the different departments. So Suzanne and I have been working really hard on a lot of initiatives to integrate sustainability and have those conversations. So this next year, I just hope that we can build on those relationships, offer more programming for students, faculty, and staff, and really be a resource to you. We just continue to get better and better at Temple University, and that's in large part because of the students, right? You are the reason that I'm here, that we're all here, and you really have a tremendous amount of power and in a voice in the climate conversation at Temple and beyond.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know we're hearing a lot from students that they're interested to know, what their university's climate action plan is. And we're so fortunate at Temple to have you taking that on and also serving as a resource for all of us. And I'm excited to about our collaborations and what we will have in store in the future for Ed Abroad too. Lots of comments coming into the chat about takeaways. Jornay says, they enjoyed the moment about food and sustainability and climate actions in different countries. It's really encouraging to see other places being food conscious. And I want to support Indigenous communities and making sure other perspectives are heard. Eliza's going to do smaller grocery runs to have less waste and try composting in her apartment. Leah says, Kerry's point about learning about how other countries are navigating climate change, shifting away from the US Western-centric perspective was really important and thought-provoking. I agree. Personally, I think composting is on the horizon for me in the future. We'll do more, and we need more conversation about how to do it and what it looks like. Rebecca, I think that we need maybe an info session on how to compost. Can we?
Absolutely, and there's and there 100%. We will make it happen next semester. We can offer input on. There are a couple different ways to do it, so hopefully we'll find one that works for you.
It looks like we also need to we need a workshop on how to make use of SEPTA more efficiently.
Yeah, their tagline at one point was, "We're getting there."
Awesome. Oh, goodness. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. This was such a great session, and special thanks to Rebecca for facilitating, and to all of our panelists. It was so great to have you all here and to hear all of your perspectives. And I'm really looking forward to being able to share this with others in our community who are not able to make it today. So thank you all so much.